Hi, this is Dr. Tiv and welcome to one of my videos. Now today we're going to be talking about taking impressions. Now these are one of the things that should be simple for dentists, but it's actually one of the most complex things to do. And the reason for that is if you don't get it absolutely right at the start, you're going to find the rest of your process snowballs to something that takes much longer and much harder than it should be. So if you don't take a great primary impression, by the time you get your denture back or you get your crown back, what's going to happen is that they're not going to fit. You're going to spend a lot more time adjusting than you actually need to. Now, the first thing we need to do is look at the patient comfort and to make sure that they're not going to gag during this process. Now, if you look up above, what you'll see is a link to another video I did on 3 easy steps on preventing the patient from gagging while you're taking impressions. The second thing to do is make sure you get the right tray. Now, if you get the right tray, what you'll notice is that when you seat it in, it doesn't touch any of the teeth. And if it does, you might use a Bunsen burner to basically mold it out of the way so that when you seat it in, it's actually going to seat in nicely without touching any of the teeth. What I tend to do is I tend to seat it in a few times just to make sure I know where the tray handle sits. So when it's full of impression material, I know when the correct angle of that tray is so it doesn't hit any of the other teeth. The next tip that I'd like to tell you about is when you insert trays, don't insert it straight into the patient's mouth. You actually have to stretch it out quite a lot and it can be quite uncomfortable for the patient. What I tend to do is put the tray in almost 90 degrees and then swivel it in place. And that way you only have an arc of the tray going in and it's actually not as wide as it is if you put it in straight away. So you're not actually stretching the patient too much, they're feeling comfortable and they're also finding that you're a professional, you know what you're doing because you're not actually heading at all in the whole process. Next, when you get your assistant to mix the alginate, what I'm going to get you to do is when you get the spatula, make sure you push it down all the way down using downward pressure into the tray. A lot of the times when we fill in the tray, we leave voids underneath. So when it gets pushed in, the voids need to be filled out first. And so you don't get this overflow of material getting into the sulcus and the rest of the area. Most of that pressure is used to actually fill in the actual tray itself. So make sure you push it down all the way will make the final impression look really good. The next part is something that I was taught by a technician in Warrego when I worked with him many, many years ago. And that was that alginate is hydrophilic and so loves water. So you can actually smooth the surface down and make it a very smooth surface so when you take impressions, you've actually got a really detailed impression of the teeth that you're taking. And the way to do is get some water on your glove and maybe even run this over the tap for a second and basically rub the top of it down with your finger. And what you'll do is you'll smooth out the alginate to get a really, really fitted surface. Finally, you probably want a post dam in there to stop the material going down the back of their throat. And if you have a look at the top there, you'll see a link to one of the videos I made about how to do a 10-second post dam, which is 10 seconds to get a dam on the back of it so the material doesn't go down the back of someone's throat. The last part is taking the impression material out. If you've taken a good impression, you're actually going to get a lot of suction in there. And if you get a lot of suction, what it'll mean is it's going to be really hard to pull the whole impression material down. And the way that I found it works really well is to get your finger, put it up on the patient's sulcus, use it as a point to push down on the tray and then tip the tray with your finger as well. So you basically tilt the tray and you'll push down with your finger and what it'll do is just break the seal and the impression material will come out really easily. So they're my tips on taking great impression. That if you love these videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button. That's how I know that you like these videos and want to see more of them. And you might see a bell icon as well. If you hit that icon, basically you get notifications every time I release a new video. That way you won't miss out on any great content. Now, this is Dr. Tiv, over and out.